Welcome to the Reality Break stream, where we escape the real world for a little bit to normally play Dungeons & Dragons, but today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons, which is just as good. So, for anyone that's new to the channel, welcome in. Make sure you give a follow, hang out. If you want to chat, cool. If you don't want to chat, that's absolutely cool too. So, I am, as always, Tony, HBMW 2000, the DM for the current campaign in Starheal, and with me today we have D, who plays our human artificer, Morag. That word always throws me off. I feel like I'm saying it wrong every time I say it, even though I'm not.
Artificer.
Artificer. Artificer.
Artificer. One-armed companion.
Yep. There we go. And we have Kaylee, who is playing Jen, our halfling monk. Down there. Actually, no, you're up here by my perspective, so yeah. I have to, like... Hi, Kaylee. There we go. Alright, so, so today, we are going to be doing what, frankly, I've been excited for the longest time, which is the DM Summit. So what the plan is we're going to sit and talk about our experiences as DMs. And what's good is we have a nice mix. I myself have done some home brews and some... Where did Discord go? There we go. Some home brews and some modules. Dee's experience is mostly with home brews, and Kaylee's experience is mostly with modules. So... I'm really excited. I've talked about this ever since we finished our first campaign with Dee's experience, especially since that was her first time DMing. I know first off, you did a fantastic job.
Oh, thank you.
Especially for your first time. But let's start there then. So since that was your first time DMing, tell us about what your thought process was with building the world, and some of the major NPCs, because I know we threw a lot of, like, you had to come up with NPCs on the fly.
A lot of curves.
Some plain NPCs. But let's start with you to talk about how your thought process was, where you started, and how you constructed your world.
So originally when I started, it was literally just with a story. I had an idea of like, okay, well, what if we had a group of people trying to find this hidden princess, and then I'm gonna throw them for a loop, but then, they threw like 1 million back at me.
Look,
but it was
high charisma. That's the curse of characters with high charisma.
It wasn't even high charisma, it was...
We miss Demacos.
Oh, he may be making a return. Demacos, my friends, may be making a return. He may be making a return.
Absolutely.
He may be a DLC character.
Oh my god, okay. There is hope in the world. Anyway, so basically I just started with that. I developed my characters from that. As far as naming, I assume I do like everyone else and I use a name generator most of the time. Otherwise, I just kind of think of funny names that will just kind of bring a comedic effect sometimes, but like still have that atmosphere of like being a fantasy kind of thing. Other than that, honestly, that's how I base mine. But everything else from there is just kind of a ladder of how to get to the end. So starting from A to B, where do you want them to start?
Mm-hmm.
You have to have them start in a tavern because it's D&D.
Do you though?
When it's your first campaign.
When it's
this is
okay,
what
yes.
you do. When it's your first campaign, you have them start in a tavern.
Yep.
You say, there's a bar. What do you do? Done. Your campaign's done. From there, it's just your imagination. But, no.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Basically.
For sure.
Yeah. But, yeah, I mean, it was really just a story is generally how I start my homebrews, and I get kind of an idea from that, and I just kind of let my imagination play around with different scenarios and how to, how to get them from A to B and back again if need be, and, going through all of those things, creating a map, a physical map that you can actually see is generally the best way, even if you're just going, okay, well, if I want a town square, let me draw a town square.
Mm-hmm.
And literally just doing that as is. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, going from there. The campaign that I'm DMing right now started off with a dream, actually. After we ended our last campaign, the one that I DM'd, I had a dream that I was free-falling through the sky and a dragon was like rushing me, and it turns out like it had grabbed me in the middle of battle and dropped me. So that's how I started off with the story of that campaign.
That's brilliant. I love it.
So it's just those little ideas. Like if you see something in real life that you're like, I could fantasize that, Just going from there and doing little things like that.
Oh, where is my... Hold on. I have a... Where is it? There we go. I have a notepad that is entitled D&D... Oh, sorry, don't mind that. D&D Ideas. So pretty much, quite literally anything that I see in real life, I see in a show. I just, pull up the keep notes, jot down, 3 or 4 sentences. So we've got... just throwing out, a couple random ones. Wreckage of a boat on a mountain.
Yep.
I don't know how I would use that, but I think that's a cool idea, and I got that from Witcher 3. Because there's a quest you undertake for to cure a curse from someone, and you end up having to go up to this place on this mountain, and you find a boat up there. Spoiler alert for anybody that's not played Witcher 3.
Dang it.
I've got some cool NPC names. For example, I have a name for a doctor or a mortician at a town called Sawbones. I just saw that somewhere and I'm like, that would be a cool name for someone.
Okay.
Dr. Sawbones.
Yep.
I like it. Let's go.
Yep. So yeah, just, so I have the same idea. Just if I see something in the real world, I just jot it down real quick. And then, I look at it later and I go, wow, that's a really cool idea. Or wow, I have no idea what that means.
Me, most of the time.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
For sure.
Also, welcome in, TakiTuber.
Hey, TakiTuber! Thanks for coming in. Appreciate it. The dream means that inspiration will literally swallow you. Pretty heavy.
Dr. Boner.
Boner.
There you go.
I
That's
love
another good
it. But it could be pronounced like German, like Boner.
Boner. And they could be constantly correcting everybody. So when they say, "Oh, thank you, Dr. Boner," it's Bonner.
Like Dr.
Frankenstein. Be like a really pretentious.
That's Frankenstein.
Yeah, exactly, and be really pretentious.
Gosh, yeah.
So that's always fun. So Kaylee, your experience is mostly with modules. What is your thought process with going through picking out a module, and how do you do any kind of tweaks with it while you're DMing, or do you kind of just stay strict and true?
So a lot of the times I was running with modules because I was teaching small humans how to play, or brand new players how to play. So it was a very much like, I don't need to think about my world building because that's already plugged in for me. But the parts that it would lead me to, because there are so many questions that the players can have based on how much they like role play, their level of their age level, or their level of playing, you start digging into those things that are usually purposely left open in a good module, because even if a module takes place in a certain world, it's usually easy to plonk it somewhere else, or completely put it into your homebrew world. Because that was actually something that I hadn't thought about before, Tony, was that sort of anything that's not, you're running strictly to the D&D books, worlds, and lore and stuff like that. It's homebrew. If you made up the world name, if you made up stuff like that. So that's cool to sort of open that thought process up to things, because I kind of always considered myself only using pre-printed materials, but it's true that it becomes its own homebrew universe, based on the wizard's lore or whatever.
Hey, the MCU taught us that multiverses are real things, so, you can run something that's similar to what we know, and then tweak one or two things about it, and there you go. You've created Universe 838. So,
yeah,
instead
exactly.
of water deep, it's water shallow.
That's cute.
Water knee height.
Talking about, we've heard of the Delian tomb that Matt Kelville wrote.
No. I don't know that one specifically.
Matt Colville,
yeah, Matt Colville. What's great, what I like about Matt is he is very much like, at least I get the impression, because I only follow him on Twitter. I've never actually met him in real life. But I feel like he's very anti-establishment when it comes to D&D. He's not afraid to, throw out his own ideas, and challenge stuff a lot. So I don't know the Delian tomb specifically, but Matt Colville I really enjoy following. So then that kind of leads me to the next question. When you guys are, is there any kind of specific inspiration that you guys look for when it comes to, world building? Because I know, Dee, you had mentioned that you kind of came up with, well, what if they were finding a hidden princess and they ended up, doing this big twist? Was there something that, inspired you to go that route? Or was it just kind of you were tossing around ideas randomly?
To be honest, I was sitting at work on a Saturday, because I used to have to work 8 to noon every other Saturday. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to take this time to just try to write a story. And so I started writing and I hated it. And then I started writing and I hated it. And I started writing and I hated it. And then finally I was like, you know what? All of these stories that I have suck. But together, they make it kind of fun. So I combined 3 of them together. So the whole... So the Princess Aside was its own story. Her being engaged to
the Hand of the King.
Mate or whatever his name was.
I just remembered the Hand of the King.
Yeah, the Hand of the King, the Hand of the King. So that was its own story, and her escaping. And then her sister being, her bastard sister being the sorceress to the king was its own story. And then the actual Hand of the King turning it was Lord of the Rings. Let's be honest, that part was Lord of the Rings. I'm gonna be 1,000,000%. I was like, what does this remind me of? It was 100% Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Again, just drawing from real world experiences.
Exactly.
I love that when we were making our characters and I kind of picked that background and I was like, hey, do you have a suggestion for my revelation or whatever it was? And you were like, actually, yes. Now you're in the story. And that was so much fun to kind of run with that and have that sort of unique spin on my character that like was two different people almost.
Yeah.
And it was really fun. It gave it a lot of flavor.
Yeah, it did. It really did. It was a lot of fun to just kind of... That's one of my favorite parts about being a DM. Completely, like all storytelling aside, like, getting to actually pull your, like, campaign people into your story. You know, not having them be in the story as a whole, but just, like, getting to be like, I can relate you to this NPC somehow and make that background even stronger and build on that. And then that's how your one shot turns into a 4-month campaign.
A mini campaign. Mini to moderate campaign. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's like the best thing. So I am a sucker for... not a sucker for, that's not the right term for it, but one of the things that I love doing as a DM is having my players engaged in the world, invested, that's the word I'm looking for, invested in the world. And if it's like, you go to this bandits, you know, you're going to this town to help save bandits, help save the town from bandits. Like, that could be fun in itself, but like, why should the characters care so much about taking care of these bandits outside of like generic do the right thing or generic just get paid for it? So, you know, that's when you loop in, you know, that's when you start talking to your players and saying, hey, I have this idea for your character that I think would be cool. Do you want to go with it? And they go, yeah, great, or no, not that, but I have something similar. I have this idea for it. And you go, okay, great, I'll work that in. Because as a DM, I myself, like, if you give me something, I will do my damnedest to work it in somehow to the greater scheme. You know, granted, it takes a little bit of going back and forth with your player, and also the player not afraid to come to you and say, hey, is it okay if I do this? Not to give anything away, but I know, Dee, you came to me a couple times to change Morag's backstory and go, you had an idea for this, and then you're like, you know what, actually, can I do this? And I go, okay, fine. And you're like, well, but can I also do this? And I'm like, sure. Why not?
No, it's more like, why does she keep doing this? Okay, fine.
And that is, like Talkie Tuber said, that ends up being a little bit of a tightrope for a DM, and you want to make decisions that can be lasting, that you don't have to retcon later too much. Which is why, especially with homebrew, the recommendation usually, if you're making homebrew items or things like that, it's going to be take a class, a race, an item that already exists and flavor it to what you're looking for. But take the bonuses and the stats and things like that already exist and flavor them accordingly.
Yeah, for sure. And Taki, you do bring a good point. Player agency is always a tightrope walk, though. Because on the one hand, you definitely want to like get your players invested in the world and invested in what you're doing. On the other hand, you don't want it to like overwhelm the story, so that way you feel like you're writing the story. You're creating a world and writing a story based on like what they want to do. You want the people to fit into your world, but you don't necessarily want your whole world to fit around them. Because then it stops being about your story.
One party, right. It kind of is that you are building a world that like it goes on around them, but it's still built for them.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that's where we get into, you know, the moments of improvisation, where somebody, you know, a player, and I want to get your guys' perspective on this too. I come in because there's various DMing styles. There's some people that are creative enough and quick thinking enough to go, you know what? I have one idea that this party needs to succeed for this session. I'm just going to let them figure it out from there. And let them do whatever, and I'll figure it out on the fly. I'm a little bit okay with that, but I couldn't do an entire 3 or 4 hours campaign session of like just saying, you guys do whatever, I'll figure it out. Nope. Right. No, thank you. So I tend to have like that's just terrifying to think about.
I feel like that would be painful to watch.
Yeah, especially since, there'd be way more that I have to pay attention to and write down and all that stuff. It's hard enough with you guys already.
Don't look at me.
I think if you have an overarching theme, and especially the trope idea would be a tavern with a job board, or like a town square with a job board, so that there are many directions that they can go in, and your main problem, like say in the idea of the D&D Essentials set, there's a dragon. There's a dragon. You don't fight it I don't even know if we're gonna actually fight it, but it has been attacking towns, it has been attacking farms, and it is widely known that there is a looming dragon problem. But around that has sort of come this other overarching theme of what our party is experiencing in the world itself, because there's festivals going on down in the south of the world that one of our party members was connected to because he was a member of the circus. And then up in one of the bigger cities, there's something going on because we gave a magical item to the House of Knowledge and it didn't work the way it was supposed to. And so we're down here 3 days away hearing about that something went really, really wrong, and we're going but chasing that. But also, like right at the start, before our characters started, touching the world and giving the DM ideas of other adventures that could happen, there was this sort of, the town we met in had a whole bunch of things that also needed to get done.
Right.
Whereas one of them would go clean out this stronghold because there's a dragon flying around and the town needs to be able to flee to that stronghold. Things like that. So.
Yeah. And that's good for like, something like that is really good for like, especially if you've got a bunch of new players, for example, getting them comfortable with certain scenarios. Like you could have one of the jobs be purely go clean out this bandit hideout. Another one could be clearly, which I think would actually be kind of fun as hell, would be help the local guardsmen investigate a murder. So that's more role-playing as opposed to fighting. So people get used to like asking questions, rolling for different checks, role-playing and stuff like that. Another one could be, Farmer Joe needs help tending his field, so that way you can learn about athletics checks and investigation checks and more problem-solving stuff about, this hoe is broken, do I have the means to fix it kind of stuff. So that's really cool. So that's a really cool idea for something for beginners. So going back to what I was saying, like, so with your guys' DM style, because like I said, there's people that can there's DMs that can sit down and go, you know what, I'll just let them go and I'll go along with them. I myself like to keep a bare bones of like, you guys can do a bunch of stuff within here, but eventually by the end, we should be making their way to a certain direction or kind of thing. Right. So it's not exactly on the rails, because how you get there, you can do whatever. And then there's other DMs that are strictly like, these are the rails. If you start veering too far, I will guide you back in to make sure that you end up going where I want you to go exactly. So what would you say your DM style is in that regard? And then what would be, potential pluses and minuses if you were to join a DM or join a group that was that a DM for a specific style?
I think the too much either way would be uncomfortable, especially to a new player. It would be almost dangerous for a brand new player, because if you feel like that's like how it goes, playing in a world, if you have either too much freedom and you don't know what you're supposed to be doing, so nothing ever gets done and the story doesn't get told, or not even too much freedom, but not enough direction, not enough sort of hooks and things like that. And then the too much direction just becomes, I don't get to make any of the decisions. I'm just sitting here listening to a story. But I feel like it's a good idea. I like how you said that you have that point. Like, I would say that I don't necessarily have a single point per session, but that, like, there are certain goals that the players are working towards, and like maybe over the last few sessions it seems like they're working towards this goal, so that's the one we're kind of still working on. And like, if it's the big overarching goal of like defeating the dragon, under defeating the dragon is going to be making this town make sure they have a safe place to go, finding out if anyone knows or if there's certain things that you can fight dragons with, or did someone release this dragon on the world, or is it just looking for treasure? Like, so all those things can become different points of interest, and you sort of like lay them out either right away if it makes sense with a job board type of thing, or through conversation with locals that you've got, like, this is the person that knows about dragons and this is the person that knows about the things that have been going on around town, which you can also default to if you needed to, a town master who knows everything. But basically having those options, and the players will follow the carrots, and then you go, okay, it seems like my characters are interested in protecting this town, helping this town fortify itself. So now I can go, okay, they need to see the armorer, they need to see the town guard, they need to go see that fortress and check it out type of thing. So then once again, they're still picking which way they're taking it, and you can sort of go, okay, check, they've finished this path, now what else, someone at this first quest that they've finished can go, oh, awesome, have you checked with the armory, because I heard they were looking for some help too, or whatever it is.
Sure.
To kind of guide them along without making it be like, you have to go do this.
Yeah.
And as you said on the other spectrum, you go into town, what do you do?
Yeah. That can be hard.
That can be hard, especially for, like I said, like you said, new players to even like intermediate players, because there's some intermediate players that are like, give me some rails so that way I don't have to worry about spending my entire time, like spending an hour game time, real time in this town trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do.
Right. And that's where you sometimes get stuck, where you said, where sometimes you feel like, oh no, I didn't have enough NPCs set up for this or whatever. And sometimes that can just be solved by being like, okay, you walk into town and you see that there is a town crier. That's an easy way to get players hearing something to give them a direction. There could be an argument in the street. There could be a flyer up on the side of a building. Anything if you, as a DM, mention it, your players will think it's important. Like, no matter what. Even if you didn't mean for it to be important. If you describe the flowers in front of the bakery, they're going to think there's something about the flowers.
Or,
so that's
a random dwarven family that decides to donate some money to a band playing, that all of a sudden you got to create names, and now, like, great, at some point I'm going to have to give them some kind of vague background. Because I know when next time they come back to town, they're going to be like, how's the Stonewall family? And I'm going to be like, God bless it.
Maybe.
Rockwall, sorry. My apologies. Props to you for keeping good notes. Because I clearly did not.
I literally wrote it down at the top of my notes. I was like, the Rockwall family is very important.
Of course you did.
You're welcome.
Right,
You're
great.
welcome.
Guess what? They're the BBEGs in this campaign, so good luck.
The Rockwalls, no. Yeah. Well, I mean, and even just like giving them that freedom, but you walk into a tavern, what do you do? But saying, you walk into a tavern, you see a booth in the corner, there's a few tables, a fireplace, and a group of people sitting at a table. What do you do? And then this Russian guy goes up to the people at the table when he should go up to the tavern, and then all hell breaks loose. So,
I don't know what you're talking about. I felt like that first session, that first interaction went really well, and everybody had a good time.
Yeah, it didn't derail the entire one-shot at all.
Look, and that that talks back to what we kind of talked about a little bit earlier with characters or with players, connecting with their DM beforehand and go, hey, running stuff by them, because clearly, and that's my fault, I assume partial responsibility for not going to you, say, hey, just to let you know, Demakos is super friendly, and he's gonna go talk to anybody he can. Especially if there's a group of mysterious-looking people at a table, because he is all about, if I can make money somehow, I'm gonna make money. And if they're sitting there playing, because were they playing a game, or are they just sitting there?
There was no mystery. I said they were sitting there playing cards and eating lunch.
There we go. So I'm like, I'm gonna go. I'm a gambling man. I like making money. Let me go talk to the people playing cards. Lord, I was born a rambling man.
Yeah, Demarcus was like the Flynn of that campaign.
Basically, yeah.
Let's go talk to people. Oh, that looks exciting. Let's go get involved.
Everybody needs a Demakos.
And that actually kind of talks to that. That's a good point that you bring up, because not everybody can be mysterious and brooding. Not everybody can have a hidden past. You have to have that one person that's like,
except me.
Well, you and Kira a little bit too. Both of you are like, I don't like talking about, and Clancy to a certain extent is like, I don't want to talk about my past. It's like, well, somebody has to talk about their past.
No.
Somebody has. Somebody has to have. Book. Yeah. So, but that helps a DM as well, because that's that character that's like, when you say, oh, you notice in front of this bakery shop that there is a row of roses. That's the person that's going to go, well, let me go smell the roses. Let me go see if I can talk to the baker about where they got the roses from. And while it creates that, like, oh, crap, what do I do kind of moment, where you're like, crap, this is going in a different direction.
Yeah.
It gets the players more invested, because then they're contributing to the world building to a certain extent.
Yep.
Because, it was frustrating and a little stressful that Demakos went up and talked to those guys playing cards, but it got me invested, because it's like, oh man, I found something out. I found out something out super cool that's going to be helpful, and you got to go, yeah, I wasn't expecting him to do that, but now I could create this whole extra little thing that's kind of just for him, or something that the party found out that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Well, and even with those people like that came up to Flynn and or the roses or any of those, it's also good because you can see how if you see that you've got a character that likes to interact and stuff like that, like you kind of touched on, is you could even turn that into a hook either right then or later.
Yeah.
Those roses could be prize-winning roses that no one else knows how they grow their roses so beautifully, and all of a sudden they're dying, or someone's been stealing them. Or this kid could have come up to Flynn and been like, "I'm your biggest fan," da-da-da-da, and he friggin' stole a piece of his soul or something. Like, I don't know, there's monsters that do that.
Sure.
Or just a pickpocket that stole his gold pouch and things like that. So it's like you gotta walk the line of not turning your characters into like paranoid and scared to interact with your world, but you can make it interesting in lots of different ways, and tie it in or not tie it in, because you can easily make it something forgettable. And it's okay, it's safe to make things forgettable. Because you can also later on be like, no, his name was Troy. I don't know who you're talking about. I've never heard of Tyler. My name's Troy.
But they're twins!
Oh my god! I take the mindset of any interaction can be turned into a side quest. That's kind of the mindset I take, depending upon how conversations go. So I wanted to actually ask about this. Going back to where Dee said about you walk into a bar, what do you do? Versus you walk into a bar, there's a big fireplace roaring in the background, and there's a table, and there's tables in the middle that are like partially filled, and all this stuff, and there's two bartenders hustling back and forth behind the bar. What do you do? How are you guys feeling? How do you guys feel about roles for stuff like that, where like you walk into a bar, everyone roll a perception check. or you know, stuff like that. Like, because I know it feels a little, I don't want to say gimmicky, but for me it also makes them people more comfortable dice rolling, especially if you're dealing with a beginner to intermediate group. And it also, I like it because it gets people to think like, okay, can I do a roll for this? So what are you guys' thoughts on like doing rolls to help people notice stuff or figure stuff out as opposed to just telling them?
I guess it depends, especially if you're trying to get them used to it and stuff like that. Also, if someone asks you, is there anyone in the room that looks like they like to gamble? Or is there anyone in the room playing a card game? Is there anyone in the room eating dinner? Like, anytime they ask a specific, does my character see this? You can have them do a perception check. Even if it's an auto success, the roll could just be like how well they do it.
Right.
Or how cool it is, as my DM would say.
Okay.
I personally think it's a good idea to have people roll not only to start off with that basis of like, rolling is good, figuring things out is good, but it also gives a difficulty factor, at least in my mind, of like, okay, when it comes to actual battle, what am I going to personally need to get myself to that point of like winning the battle? And, you know, am I going to have to roll, like, I don't know, the first time I had to like roll perception or something along those lines to like understand something that they were saying, and I'm sitting there going, oh god, I'm stupid. And it kind of got me like, I rolled a 3, you know, it like it
and
gives that mindset of, can I surpass this in a battle? What do I need to do it? Like, clearly a 3 isn't going to be good enough if I'm trying to like swing an axe through the air. Like, I'm not gonna get it off my back. Like, it's gonna get stuck in the holster, you know? It kind of, but it also gives that like reaction from the DM. Like, okay, well, I rolled a 3, and then you say, okay, well, you know that they're talking to each other, but you can't quite depict what they're saying, you know? Something along those lines, because it gives that world building still, just in the sense of like, okay, well, I'm always excited to see like what the DM says about like, okay, well, I rolled a 3. You know, I'm going to go after him with his axe. My goal is to cut off his head. And I roll a 3, and my axe gets stuck or whatever. And the DM is like, axe gets stuck. And then, you know, they come through and just swipe your arm off. You know, something along those lines. Hopefully not, but doesn't matter. Absolutely. I don't have an arm, so we're good.
So Jason Wolfpack, by the way, thanks for stopping in, Jason. Appreciate it. So comment, I never DM D&D. I think most of the most intimidating part is knowing all the combat rules for all the abilities and spells. World building and improv sounds like the most fun part. Yes, I like combat because there's a little bit of that world building into it, especially if it's like especially if your party is moving towards a combat that you're planning. So that way you can really sit down and go, okay, well, instead of just the bandits jump out from behind the trees, why don't we plan something where like they've covered themselves in dirt on the ground, and then when they wheel by they pop up, or or like if you're going
looking, then they maybe get to make a check. They don't know they're checking. Maybe it's their passive perception, but sorry.
Yeah, no, you're fine. But yeah, so stuff like that, and so you could do a little bit of world building in combat too. Knowing all the combat rules for all the abilities and spells, man, books are great. D&D Beyond is great. We're not sponsored by them yet, but D&D and Beyond is great. There's plenty of resources for track stuff like that. And B, for those that have been on the campaign streams before, how often am I like, hold on?
Yeah, just that comes with time. It really comes with time. All you need is a player's handbook. If you have the DM's guide, great. If you have the websites, awesome. But if you have the player's handbook or a link to the player's handbook, you have everything you need. And all you do is search, find that rule. It's going to be in there. It'll get faster and faster as you get used to those rules.
Yeah.
But there are some we all have to look up.
It's like anything in life. Life is not... Life lessons brought to you in part by Reality Break. It's not about knowing everything. it's knowing where to find the answers to everything. So if you know, like, okay, I know that's a spell that you can cast at level 2 and something extra happens as opposed to casting level 1, let me go pull up the details and double check. You know? That is stuff, like, I think the only people that might possibly have everything memorized would be people that, you know, are professional Dungeons and Dragons
Mercer.
players. Well, not even Matt Mercer, because I remember watching Campaign 2 of Reality Roll, and he would still have to pull out the book to double check some stuff. And if you're doing a home brew, like, I know myself, I have to constantly go check something, and I go, you know what, by the book says I should do this, but I'm going to tweak this a little bit for X reason kind of thing.
And then as a homebrew, you want to make sure you mark that down so it's consistent every time that it comes up again, type of thing.
Yep, for sure. But yeah, so the moral of the story is even experienced people still have to look stuff up sometimes, so the expectation is not for you to know everything, just be able to find everything. And also there's a little bit of trust with your players. Because if a player says, like, I do this and it does this, unless it, like, really turns the tide of a battle immensely, or it changes how an entire important dialogue goes, I'm gonna be like, okay, I trust you. You know, I trust that does. Like, all of the stuff with Morag, I've never had a campaign that had an artificer before, so 9 times out of 10, if you're like, I do this, I'm like, alright, I trust you.
Well, and it helps that I've sent you everything that I have, character sheet wise and everything else. So
I can always, like, scroll, you know, pull up the character sheet and go, all right, it's on there, that's legit, kind of thing.
Right, and that's
I'm lying through everything. It's all lies.
Wait, what?
Just making it up as I go.
Wait, what? What?
And as a player, you should know what your character can do. You should know, especially going into it, whatever your base, your favorite attacks, your favorite abilities, the things your character does, you should know at least how to find them quickly, because each and every player, that is your responsibility, like, to keep the game going. We work together as players and DMs to keep things running smoothly. And so if you're a spellcaster, know which spells you have prepared and roughly what they do, so that you can go, oh, I'm next, I'm gonna get this spell ready. If you're a tank, know that you're gonna be the one running into battle. It doesn't take years of study, and it will evolve over time, but if everyone works together to hit those points, then it goes so much more smoothly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so as a DM, I definitely appreciate when a character knows what they plan on doing ahead of time. And granted, it's not an easy thing to do, but at the same time, there's plenty of stuff that a DM can do to help help make decisions easier without telling them specifically what to do. I know the big thing I do, especially in combat, because not everybody writes down initiative order for everything. So I like to do, Morag, it's your turn. Jen, you're up. You're on deck. So that way Jen goes, okay, while Morag's taking her turn, I can sit down and figure out what I want to do. Or, another good one would be something like, you see 3 enemies coming at you that are very closely clumped together, charging at you blindly. So that, so that can go, okay, let me do something that has AoE effect kind of thing. Because the goal of the DM should be, one of the goals of the DM, while making this, fantastic story and, feel people engaged, is to also make things not as easy as possible, but, like, not have to worry about mechanical stuff as much as possible. Because the world building and the role playing is the most fun for most people. Combat is still fun, but most people enjoy world building and role playing over that.
Yeah. Same.
And the combat, like, a lot of time once you've played a character, you get it. And so if you try to play one of each type of class, you will have a grasp so much more of the combat mechanics and the options of actions that your characters have. And so, like, that will open things up, and it will also give you understanding as a DM of things that you either need to consider or can consider to give your players options of things to do. Like, I watched, my daughter was playing, who plays in our long-running campaign, her druid was always obsessed with getting animal friends. And our DM went up with it and, let her run off to collect some animal friends. And it ended up, she ended up doing a job for a hag, and we're dealing with the repercussions of that still. And so those things are very carefully considered, because that, went with the story. But there were also times where, like, my daughter was taking it too far, trying to get information from an NPC, and she was like breaking down a door, and she gave her hints, like, are you sure you want to do that? The town master says he's going to call the guard, etc. And then she got arrested because she kept going with the choice. And she also lost the party gold, and the party was not happy. And at that point it became, no, sorry, you can't do that, you're in jail, and we're going back to the other party, or the rest of the party, because she was supposed to be doing something for the rest of the party, and it didn't work out well. And that was, a new player can do that. It does not have to be a child. It happens.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I have a perfect example of that. First off, another reality break life lesson. If you break the rules, there's going to be consequences.
What did I do?
Nothing yet.
Oh.
But I had another example of something like that, where and this was not like you said, a child. This was just somebody that was, I'd say, slightly above beginner. They walked out of a tavern, and I had a guy that was basically like handing out pamphlets, and he was like, "Hey, good day, sir. Have you?" I don't even remember what specifically it was. I think it was like a religious one. Be like, "Have you heard about our Lord and Savior Palandor?" And he was like, no, thank you. And I was like, let me roll with this, see what happens. And so he did it again, and then he was like, oh, this guy's so annoying, I just want to shove him away. And I'm like, do you do that? And he's like, you know what, why not? I'm like, are you sure? He's like, yeah, sure, why not? Shoved him away. Sure enough, exact same thing happened. Guards were called, guy was thrown in jail.
Yeah.
So it's like, actions have consequences, like in the real world.
What? No. Also, welcome in, Gift of Gabby.
Yes, welcome in.
We are doing well. We are doing well. Hope you're having a wonderful day as well. Morning, afternoon, evening, night. And thank you for stopping into the Reality Break DM Summit.
Breaking
news.
Eyeball.
We are 4 followers away from affiliate.
Let's go, dude.
We are
super exciting.
Yeah. What? How do DMs feel? How do DMs usually feel about characters with high passive ability?
Thank you for the follow, Gift of Gabby. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Welcome. Yeah.
Ignore the passive score and roll anyway, or use the passive score. So it's whether you're making a passive, if you're talking, especially if you're talking about passive perception, that's going to be something the character notices without trying. If the character's trying to do something, it's no longer a passive, it's a roll, and it's their perception skill.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you for the follow, HG8 Scott. Appreciate it.
H. Great Scott. That's my mom.
Hey, Mama D, Mama D. That's awesome. Hi, Mama D.
Mom.
Your dinosaur, your daughter is fantastic, and she's a good friend and a wonderful person. So
I do what I can. Dinosaur. Your players love your world building, but can tell when they've gone off plans. Bro. I feel like it shows on every DM's face when you're like, yeah, they're doing the thing. And then you go, uh-oh, they did the thing.
Yep. It's a moment of, for DM, it's a moment of pure, like, oh my god, this is great, with, oh my god, how am I gonna figure this out? Like, there's like 30 seconds of like, you could see the cogs in their brain moving.
Wheels turning.
Especially when they're a little bit rusty and you're like, crap, get some oil.
AKA
get in there.
me the entire way through my first DM. Like anything, it was horrible.
Well,
No, not horrible. It was wonderful.
Wonderful but
improv-
stressful.
The improv skill of yes and. So like the yes and is where you say like, okay, and here's what happens, or okay, and here's what that means for that thing that you want to make happen. So
Yeah,
like you can
right.
take the ideas of your characters, and it, if your character says something like, I think I heard something outside, and you don't want it to become something, you can literally be like, sure, you open the door and you find trash cans full of possums in the trash. And that was the noise that they heard. And so
Yeah.
they've explained the world, they've satisfied, or the noise, they've satisfied their curiosity, and you didn't have to turn it into anything. Or once again, if that tickled your fancy, you could later on be like, maybe something is happening with the trash cans
Sure.
in the city.
Sure. Before we move on to the improv thing, because that's something I want to discuss in further detail, I kind of want to go back and touch on Jason's questions about feeling about
Yes.
characters with high passive abilities. I think the biggest thing is they have those passive abilities for a reason. They have those high passive abilities for a reason. So I'm okay with them being able to use their passive stuff to do some basic baseline stuff where you walk and it's very easy, and that can also be very easy for establishing environment. Like the party walks, going with the scenario we've been talking about this whole time. The party walks into a bar. Player A, you notice before anybody else that there's a mysterious cloaked person hanging out in the corner drinking by themselves. And then that person could go, oh, that's interesting. What do I notice about them? And then at that point, you can make them roll to see what else they notice beyond. And that's just using perceptive as an example. Like other stuff for like athletics, if they have high passive athletics, that makes like, climbing walls easier. But if it's like a sheer-faced rock wall, no high passive athletics ability is going to make you be able to climb that without some kind of check or savings throw if it doesn't go well. So I'm okay. I like players with high passive abilities because it kind of makes some stuff easier, like I said, for environment building. And then it allows you to it allows them to, once again, get invested in what's going on. Like, for example, player A goes, oh, you can turn to the party and be like, hey, party, look at that mysterious cloaked guy over there. I'm gonna sit over here and see if I can notice anything else about him, kind of stuff. So
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
so I think I missed something. Oh yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. I lost my
Wow,
mouse.
Gabby, running 4 games, crazy. That's awesome.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Also, I
Something
love
like
that
you
the
and
people that love your building are like your family.
Yeah, family.
I love it.
Oh, look at that. Let's
and
see
my-
here. My players love my
say-
world building or my family, mom, sister. Oh, that's awesome. Hey, the
Right.
family that D&D's together stays together.
Exactly, that's why I'm mother of nerdlings.
Yep. There you go.
sometimes
So
my-
Married to a
Something
nerd.
like anyone with a passive perception of 15 or higher notices that.
Mhm.
And she'll give the information, assuming that we're probably sometimes she'll if she gives us the information and then we turn around and say to another member of the party, we'll sometimes clarify, do you tell them that? But other times it's almost like we just kind of respond, okay, we tell the party that.
yeah.
kind of thing.
So that now I want to go back to Gabby's how to improve improv.
Wait, I have a question before we move on. Have
Sure.
you guys ever bent the rules a little bit? Like you have your must be above 15, perception or whatever, like your role. So have you guys ever
players
bent
to
that?
notice?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Because I think that's okay.
Yeah.
But
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
For the good of the storyline, for the good
Yeah.
of the campaign,
Yeah.
it's always okay to bend that a little bit to be
Sure.
like, oh, it was 16.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
So you kind of notice. You could also give it to them like, you think you hear your name mumbled in the corner of the room, and so at that
Right.
point they're looking and they get to make a roll, or just
Yeah.
don't put maybe ahead of time, if it's something you know you want them to notice, make sure that the DC is like 10 instead of 15.
Right.
Yeah.
And you can fudge rolls so that you don't kill your players and things like that. If you didn't intend for this to be a lethal situation, you can be like, okay, it only did 4 damage instead of 16.
Yeah, like, oh man, I wish I'd rolled that better. Darn.
Yeah.
Because and that actually kind of leads into don't worry, Gabby, I haven't forgotten about the how to improve improv, because I do want to talk about that a little bit more, because that's an aspect of DMing that is probably the hardest in my mind. That's the hardest thing to do.
Yeah. It really is.
But crap. What were we were just talking about fudging rolls
for the greater good.
For the greater good of the story. Oh, so I actually, for those that don't follow on Twitter, or I think she has an Instagram too, Jeannie D. She is, she also has a YouTube channel, and she does a lot of these, like, 9 things players wish their DMs did, or how to make your role playing easier for your players, like that kind of series, and she's really fun. Definitely recommend giving it a follow. But one of the tips that she gave for something like that, where like with perception and stuff like that, noticing stuff, is if you want them to figure something out or get something and they don't get it in the place that you want them to get it, just give it to them just give it to them in another scenario. Like, oh, they were supposed to go to this library to get this book. Oh, they decided to go to this magician shop. You know what? The book is in the magician shop now, kind of thing. Where you're kind of moving stuff on the fly to make sure that you progress the story, so that way you're not wasting time to go, wow, you really should go back to the library, wink, wink, nudge, nudge kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, being able to lead them back in that kind of way is always good.
Yeah, and especially
making
if it's
a full circle.
Exactly, and especially if it's an item that, like, they don't know they need. Like, if they don't know they need to go to this library to get this book, that you just want them to find it because it helps move it. Okay, well, I want them to go to the library. Oh, crap, they went to the School of Magic instead. Okay, well, the book they need is just in the School of Magic now, kind of thing. So,
right.
So don't be afraid to change where items or where plot points are even planted. Because I'll reveal a little secret, first instance of behind the curtain. The plan was not for you guys to go to Aces to find out about the cart. You were supposed to pretty much just go out to Firebrand and then hear from Lockjaw that carts go through there every once in a while, and he thought that there was one coming up soon, based on timing and stuff.
I will take full responsibility. Because it is 100% my fault.
And that goes back to improvisation, where this random person you were talking to in the village square is now not only a part of the story, a pretty integral part of the story.
Yeah.
So then, actually, ironically enough, this ties back to how to improve improv.
Yes.
The biggest thing I would say is having, at least for me, the thing that helps the most is having like 3 or 4 scenarios kind of built in for any instance. So, like, for instance, if you guys had gone to Aces and just purely used it as like, what's going on with this cart, then it's like, okay, well, this is an informational, so he's just going to be an informational. If it goes the route of, you know, they're trying to be mysterious with their intentions and stuff like that, then he's going to be cautious. So how to improve improv for me is really just like have some stuff in the holster, so that way you're not like trying to 100% improv, especially if it's like a major major implication to story and world building and stuff.
Right. For me, it's knowing your limits. So, like, if you have a character that you're, like, really excited about and you think they're going to be, like, a really good, like, integral NPC into your story, and you kind of want them there along the way, not to be ingrained in the story, like, to be in battle or whatever, but just to, like, pop up from time to time. If you're like, I want them to be Russian, but you can't do a Russian accent, don't do a Russian accent.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're gonna have to do it multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
And that, in turn, at least for me, when I try to do something that I can't do, throws me personally for a loop.
Sure.
So, I mean, like, at least with, like, accents and things like that, because you want it to be all-encompassing, you know, this world that you've created, and, like, there's different dialects. Like, not everybody is whatever your native accent or whatever your native language is, you know? And so it's one of those things, to me, at least, that's... You guys are...
Winna, chicken dinner.
Oh, and I want a chicken dinner. It's one of those things that's very easy to mess up yourself. So doing what is within your comfort zone, especially at the beginning, will help improve your improv drastically. Because, like, I get sidetracked very easily when it comes to describing things, especially people. If I don't have anything already set aside. So, like, when my first campaign was thrown off the rails and I had to come up with an NPC quickly, and then someone asked, what do they look like? I said, plain.
Hashtag very plain.
Plain
Very
face.
Very plain.
You know, I just couldn't get those describing factors, like, in my brain right away. Whereas if I would have just, you know, sat down beforehand and said, okay, this is a list of 10 NPCs that I can draw from, and write out descriptions for each one, and then just put 10 random names, and I can put names to faces or whatever, and draw a line, like, you know, put this word to this definition in middle school, you know? And so it's one of those things, having something like that set aside that you can just kind of go back to every time helps a lot.
Sure.
When needing to have that kind of improvisational whatever, when your campaign does get derailed, you're still prepared.
Exactly.
For that improv.
Yeah. And I definitely like the know your limitations. Just real quick. I really like your know your limitations, because it's like a character. You know, if you want your character to be yourself, but if there's something you want, like, Bill, I think in one of the character creation streams talked about like doing accents for a character. If you're not comfortable doing an accent for a character, you don't have to do one. You could just say Bob says blah 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 blah. And it's it's the same thing for NPCs. We can, instead of trying to be like, oh, I've got to come up with an English accent for this character, you can say this character in a highly sophisticated manner of speaking, or like speaking like a noble, or speaking like a gruff farmer says blah 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 blah. Sorry, go ahead, Kaylee.
Well, yeah, and I don't do voices. I'm not comfortable doing voices. I'm not practiced with voices. Maybe someday. I'm not against it. I find them delightful when other players do it, but I don't. And that's okay. You don't have to. You can do other things to bring that theater of the mind. I saw Jason's comment, and it reminded me of something I saw, I believe, in a Ginny D episode, where Jason says as a player he's tempted to optimize your gameplay, which, fair, you should be, you know what I mean? Like, why not get the best of your character that you can? And the DM constantly nerfing your character, as in changing house rules to make your spells less intense and stuff like that. And the question there is, if you're going to be trying to come up with ways to stop your characters from using their abilities, then why are you letting them have those abilities at all?
Right.
So, or maybe your DM needs to scale up your encounters and make them harder so that you have to work harder to get through it instead of having to change all of these rules and change them all to house rules, because that's a lot of house rules to keep track of also.
Yes, very true.
Sure. Oh, and just a couple, I want to make sure this gets mentioned. Gabby, one of my players is from South America, like the content, and English isn't their first language. Exactly. So that's another case in point of like, don't try to make them do a fancy accent for their player. If it's hard for them to do, just, let them talk normally. Accents aren't the only way to do voices. Exactly. Sure. So you can do, and you do talking fast, high-pitched, talking, coughing a lot. Like, stuff like that to give that character personality without necessarily giving them an accent. So those are all really, really good, 100%. Really good thoughts and really good points.
Very true.
And so much of improv is that yes and. It's don't worry about correcting anybody else unless it's something that's a story point that wasn't right or something like that. It can just be like building upon and let that, if you don't get something right away, if you don't get an idea right away, that's okay. Keep letting it, add a little thing on and see where it goes. Or you can always, if you're like, I don't want my characters talking to this person, it's not helpful to them, do something like have them be like, have you been cleaning your toenails properly, and gets really close to your face or something, like something to get your characters to be like, oh my god, leave me alone, I don't want to deal with this person.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I don't like that.
Yeah, but going back to that optimized gameplay, especially in combat, you're as a player, your goal as a player, your goal should always be like, if I get into a scenario where I have to fight, my character should be knowledgeable enough to know the best way possible to resolve a conflict or defeat an enemy or something like that.
Yeah.
Personally, for me, it's up to a DM, because this is the hardest thing. This is one of the hardest things I have as a DM, and I've admitted this, is making encounters feel fresh, as well as making sure that an encounter is like 80 to 90% stressful for the players. Because at the end of the day, unless it's like, I need them to lose this battle to push a story, which I don't like the idea of using combat to push a story. Right. In that regard. What was that?
It's okay to flee.
Yeah, it's okay to flee. It's all right.
Yeah.
But you should always, the other thing you want to balance is to make combat stressful for the players without them feeling like we have no way of winning, we're going to lose.
Right.
So going back to your point there, Jason, that's kind of up to a DM, in my mind. That's up to DM to, instead of trying to nerf your character to make what they're trying to do worse, that may be a point where, you go, okay, maybe I need to reanalyze combats going forward and maybe buff them a little bit. Because I know with you guys, for our campaign, I've already had to do that a couple times where I've had to buff combat because you guys are figuring stuff out and advancing, quicker than what I'd originally anticipated. So it's like, all right, let me go back in.
Or rolling like absolute crap.
Well, that goes back to, you guys roll like crap, but it's still too early for me to go, well, that person knows that they're down, I'm going to go kill them. Whereas, they're going to be like, okay, that person's down, I don't have to worry about them, let me go work on the other people. So,
right.
I think I'm the only one to actually go down at this point.
To be fair, I was to say, to be fair, there's only been 2 combats so far, and one of them was just the getting to know you one-on-one, 1v1ings.
In most creatures and NPCs, to be fair, unless they have a personal vendetta against your character, are going to just move on once someone is knocked unconscious. Because they are no longer a threat. And unless your character takes, I think it's double their maximum hit points in one hit, other than that, they're just making death saves on their turn, unless they get hit.
Exactly.
They're down.
So going back to Jason's comment, once again.
Sorry.
Oh, he's got you. I got you.
Got you,
You are his favorite horse. Let's be fair.
No horse emotes on Twitch.
We'll need one of those. The Clydesdale.
I'm upset.
We just do a universal one, so it could be either the Clydesdale or Chunk.
Or Chunk. Yes.
But then this goes back to kind of what I'd mentioned before. Something like that, Jason, is communication with your DM. Like, because if the DM keeps doing stuff and he or she, they don't get feedback on it, they're just going to keep going, all right, well, everybody's cool with what I'm doing. So that's when it's important as a player to go back to your DM and say, hey, just to let you know,
off session.
Yeah, off session.
Right.
And just say, hey, just to let you know, this thing has been kind of bothering me. Or, hey, can we take a look at this particular issue because there are X concerns I have. And a good DM is always open to another life lesson. You should always be open to healthy discussions about how to improve.
Yes.
A good DM, a good D&D game, a good role-playing, any TTRPG game involves healthy relationships.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't be afraid. Yeah, you shouldn't be afraid as a player to go to your DM and say, hey, there's something that you're doing or we're doing that I kind of want to see if we can tweak. Conversely, a DM should be able to go to a player and say, hey, there's this one thing that you keep doing that is kind of bugging me, or I think is interrupting gameplay or game flow. Can we talk about it, kind of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And be able to, both parties need to be able to come at it from the perspective of, we want to make sure everybody has as much fun as we possibly can.
Right.
Otherwise, what's the point of it all?
Right.
Well,
and that
kind of
like so said. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
It's about everyone having fun. It's not players versus DM versus players.
Yeah.
We work together to tell this wonderful story. And the DM is the adjudicator. Like, the players need to remember that, and it sounds like, Jason, you are remembering that the DM is the one having to deal with all the rules and all of that. And you're being very respectful of that, it sounds like. But don't be afraid to, as a player, talk to them outside of session and be like, here's how I'm feeling about this. Is there something we can do? Sorry, Dee, go ahead.
No, you're good. I was just going to say, it's kind of the same deal being a DM and being a player, because you have worked so hard picking exactly what, spells, your cantrips that are going to be with you through this whole thing, what weapons you specialize in, what languages you speak, your background. You've created this entire character that you love so much, and you're playing through this campaign. But the DM has also done the exact same thing. So I feel like everybody needs to have an open mind and be, not necessarily like close-knit, but have that open mind to be able to discuss, like, hey, I really want my character to be able to do this. Is that something that can happen in this campaign? Which I have done to Tony so many times now.
And for the record, I keep saying yes, because I'm like,
I know. Just wait
that's
for the
when we go,
you know what? Next week.
You know what? This next, this one counter was going to have 3 bandits. Now it's going to have 5.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dee.
Well, and also, we've had some excellent discussions ever since that lore discussion on Tuesday. Private discussions with our DM. Some of us, obviously, Bill and I kind of know about each other's discussions because we live together, and we share as much as we choose to as players with each other. But the backstories that came out of having a discussion with the DM and saying, here's some things, the DM saying to us, here's some things, because actually here's a really great example. When you first suggested that Jen had failed someone as a bodyguard, I got a little offended. And I was like, well, why does my character have to be a failure? And then it sort of turned into this thing of, well, actually, like, it was this relationship that she found herself in, and it evolved, and then that's another reason why it was so heavy on her heart, and that's another reason, like, why she's always pushing Flynn away, and she doesn't want to make that mistake again. So it's like, make that room, and don't be afraid to talk to your DM and to your players about stuff like that, because because now the story that we have going and the story that you and Bill came up with and stuff like that, like, it's so much bigger and more exciting than it was to begin with, and it's all intertwined into the campaign.
Right. And Gabby brings up a good point, going back to Jason's comment about optimizing. There is a difference between min-maxing and not wanting to suck in combat. Yeah, so if you're trying to, create a character and have all of their abilities and all this stuff line up to the point where they can like start one-shotting baddies left and right, as a DM that's difficult, because it's like, well, any combat I'm gonna have to like I have to tailor around one player where everybody else may not have taken the time or have the time to create a character that's as powerful as yours, so you'll be fine in any combats I make, but what about the rest of the party, kind of thing.
Right.
So that's another thing you have to take in consideration.
Instead of adding more powerful bad guys, you're adding more of the smaller bad guys, right? Like, more of them for us to collectively deal with.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and that's kind of the balance between, like, do I just add more characters to an encounter, or do I scrap that encounter and put in different baddies that are more powerful? And it's
right,
because obviously, like I said, for DM, you want to make combat 80 to 90% stressful for the party. So you don't want it to be like not stressful at all for one and 110% stressful for everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
Because you want everybody to have fun.
Is going to encourage them to play to their strengths. That's the big thing, is especially in combat, but in the whole story, because role-playing, that definitely comes in too. But if you are not getting to play to your strengths, or if you're not choosing to play to your strengths as a character, you're probably not helping the party as much as you could be.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, like, there's a difference though with like story. So like, we have a spellcaster who doesn't cast very many spells, he stabs people, but that's story based. Whereas, if you're the person who has conjure animal and you bring in animals into the fight to be distraction or whatever it is, like, that's a thing you do to help your party. And
mm-hmm.
Anyone else just knowing what your character can and quote unquote should be doing if his or her friends are under attack is something that, if you're not playing to your strengths, it's almost wasteful.
Yeah. Combat's hard. In my mind, combat's the hardest thing to organize. Because for me, like, the world building and the role playing, that is, something that's really ingrained into what I like doing. Combat, I like organizing and planning, don't get me wrong, but there's more balances I think you have to figure out that you can't just, like, improv on the fly kind of thing. Yeah, you could do stuff like nerf dice rolls or something like that, but outside of that, it's really like you have a smaller structure to work with.
It's funny, I almost feel the opposite. Sometimes I end up feeling like I'm flailing a little more with main storyline roleplay, but if inside of a combat, I feel like it needs to be tweaked. I feel like I'm kind of good at being like, all of a sudden reinforcements have shown up, or something like that. That's cool, and I like to see the differences there too, because it really changes the way that your world forms.
Sure. Oh, and Gabby, what you're describing sounds super exciting. It's super fun.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I just got an idea for a campaign. Pardon me.
No! Write it down. We talked about that earlier. If you get an idea, write it down. You're like, I have no idea if it's gonna work later, but I'm gonna write it down.
I love this. The Hex Crawl city building adventure, where the players are exploring a magical post-apocalyptic world it was a space-faring magic tech civilization, and then magic nukes caused the apocalypse. Oh my god!
Bro,
So that
that's
sounds
awesome.
really funny. So I'm currently listening to a D&D podcast called High Rollers, and they have something kind of similar to that. That in regards of like 1,000 years ago or something like that, there was a race, like an overlord that came with dragonborns and goblins and stuff like that, that came from space and came down on magical spaceships that challenged the gods of the planet for like world supremacy. So the gods ended up defeating this massive army, but as a result, the technology that they had was mostly lost, and the continent, which was this big like Pangea type continent, ended up splintering. So now there's separate continents with stuff like that and oceans. So really cool idea. And so I love that that's something you're similarly going with, because like when I've been listening to this, I'm like, just the immense amount of going back to backstory and lore and stuff like that, the immense amount of lore and backstory that they've had to write out. It's just like, I love that. Like, give me more. Give me more in my cup.
Give me more.
And that is something where World Anvil is an excellent, excellent resource.
Not sponsored
that we are not sponsored yet. Because even if you never share it with your party, if you just use it to keep yourself organized, you can have everything. You can have organizations, you can have religions, you can have political, and you can make notes as you experience them in your world or come to you. It's like a little dashboard wiki of your own world. So it's really, really cool to use. And I love that, definitely if you're playing a game like Final Fantasy, like Pokemon, like any game, when you're walking around outside somewhere and you could all of a sudden have a random encounter, that having things like that your characters or your players could encounter, have a few of those in your back pocket for their camping. Did anything happen? I'm rolling a 1d20 and something did happen because I rolled a 19 or 20. And what's going to happen? I have a list of, a d12, and it's either bandits or an owl bear or whatever it is. Maybe it's even just that they heard something, it could be anything you like, and have those things on standby so that you can quickly toss something in that feels random, but you were ready, you didn't have to think it up in the moment.
Sure. And another thing, going back to your question about how to make exploration exciting, random encounters are a really good way for the Final Fantasy, the old JRPG of like you walk around and all of a sudden there's a random fight. It doesn't always have to be a random fight too. An example that really came to mind was you're walking along, roll a perception check. Everyone rolls a perception check. If somebody rolls well, they say, hey, I noticed the ground is kind of soft up here. Maybe we should walk around and avoid that. And if everybody fails it, then you have one person fall into a abandoned mine. That was grass was covered up, and you don't have to have them fall into abandoned mine and then there's a bad guy. Or there's a combat they have to do. Just have okay, your friend fell. They have a broken leg now, or they took half damage, or they fell and got knocked unconscious. Something like that.
Yep.
And it's okay, now you're not having to... It's not a combat exploration issue, but it's crap, we have to go down and get our friend. How the heck do we figure that out? And then if you want to add a little extra spice of you go walking in the cave for a little bit, and you find... This is where I keep a list of 6 or 7 side quest stuff that I can throw in anywhere at any time if something like this happens. Right. Where it's you're walking along and all of a sudden you notice a skeleton that has a scroll in its hand that has the king's seal on it. Crap, messenger fell down here, died. Do you pick up the scroll and read it, or do you return it to the king? Kind of stuff like that. So I definitely like the have the list of random encounters ready to happen, but also do stuff like that where an exploration doesn't have to always be a fight. It can be something where you have to have the players use their persuasion for stuff, or have to use their athletics, or have to use just general problem solving.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and it doesn't always have to be a roll. Yeah. It could be the way that if they describe it well enough. Or if they ask the right question, you know. It based on, make that a simple one if you're going to be looking for a certain, you know, question or phrase, but hint at it with your description. You know, you can kind of turn things into riddles too sometimes.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, and my thing with that is having that random encounter and kind of putting it on one person's shoulder, because you know you're always going to have that one person that's like, read it, read the scroll, read the scroll, screw the king, read the scroll, you know. But then you have the other pushback, which is good because that's also character building, and you as a DM get to see how your characters are going to interact with that random NPC, with that random encounter, and go from there on how you continue to build this campaign and this world and their relationships. And you can kind of, I don't know, play off of what you think that they're gonna do. Hopefully they do it, because when they don't, you know.
Well, then that's when you get to the like, well, I'm just going to take this thing and put it over here so they find it over here as opposed to right here kind of thing.
Right. You can always move things. Yes, if the opportunity was missed, unless it was like a time specific, which you can change later, you can always recycle your content if your players didn't interact with it this time.
You change the code. As a DM, you just change the code.
Yep.
Yeah, so I have hostile, exploration, social encounters, and 3 tables for the 3 BBEGs.
Oh,
that
something
is
of their
very impressive.
Like that. Yeah, that's excellent.
That's very impressive.
Multiple, I think that we have generated basically multiple BBEGs in our story for our long-running campaign format. Like my DM has sort of taken that from our actions, from what she originally imagined for the story. Because that's the thing is, if you're going to make something that's open-ended, like a campaign setting type of thing, then you want to ask yourself, what is the theme of my story?
Yep.
And that can be one word, that can be a phrase, and that can be, if that makes it easier to go, okay, what kind of people are in my world? Well, it's this theme, so, you know, or, you know, you can break it down a little further, but that helps you kind of stay on track with your improv, with your world building, with everything, and make it feel cohesive. I don't know.
Yeah.
Kinda.
Yeah. No, totally.
Good stuff. So I actually did have a couple Twitter DMs with some questions for people that, you know, couldn't make the stream. So feel free once again. You can DM any one of us questions or concerns. Just make sure to keep it respectful and professional.
Yeah.
You can also DM the main Twitter account, that is @RealityBreak20. Socials in the link. So one of the questions that I got, let me pull it up again here real quick. So one of the questions I got was, what is a memorable experience or encounter that you had as a DM? I can start because I had, you know, obviously I saw it, so I had a little bit of time to think of it. So this is a goofy one because all of my favorite experiences as a DM are when, to be frank, goofy shit happens. So I had a, I was DMing for a group, and they had a warlock that, we had a warlock that was in town collecting components to, you know, cast ritual spells when they're on the road and stuff. And so he was going around to shops, you know, saying, hey, do you guys have, you know, gem, like this type of gem that I can use? Oh yeah, it's over there, blah, 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 blah. And he walked into a general goods store and was like, hey, I need some, you know, some of this stuff, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, I also need some dirt. And I was like, interesting. So I had the store clerk look at him and I was like, so you want me to sell you dirt that you can pick out from the ground outside? I can, don't get me wrong. And I like had him set up to do this whole big sales pitch about like, we have the finest dirt in town. Here's my sack of dirt. And he was like, oh god, you know what? No, never mind. I'll just go outside and get the dirt myself. So for the rest of the campaign, it was nothing but like, so you need to go into town and get any dirt?
Yes.
And
yeah, I do, actually.
Yeah, I do, actually. So that's a story that always sticks with me because it's just like, you know, it kind of made... A, it was funny as hell at the time. And B, it also makes sure... It goes back to like as the DM, you go, are you sure you want to do that kind of thing? And it gives your players an opportunity to go, yeah, you know what, maybe that was kind of dumb or whatever, so...
Yeah.
What
was
about
the
you,
question?
Funny.
No, really. What was the question fully? One more time.
Oh, fully? Oh, just let me pull it up again.
Yeah.
It was like what was a memorable encounter or experience you had as a DM?
Encounter or experience.
The
As-
door.
The freaking door will haunt me for the rest of my life.
The door that wasn't supposed to be there.
Yeah. So mine is actually improv. So I have always prided. I have always liked my imagination.
Always been proud of.
Thank you. I am bad at words, good at exploring. What? I don't know. Anyway, I've always prided myself on my imagination and kind of quick wit when it comes to being thrown into a situation and just, you know, thinking on your feet kind of thing. So I would actually have to say, as a DM, that would probably be my favorite part, was just that stupid door.
So you'll need to provide context, because I think we have a few new viewers, so we need to provide the full story, especially since it was off stream.
It was off stream. So basically, this was back to you walk into a tavern, there's a bartender, there's someone or a group of guys sitting playing cards and eating lunch. And Demakos goes up to this group of guys.
Our wonderfully charismatic tiefling rogue
goes up to this group of guys, and they were not supposed to be anything. They were literally not supposed to be anything. They were just there to have some people in the room, so that it wasn't just a ghost town, which it was. But not fully a ghost town, but it was just one of those things. He's trying to get information out of them, and I am trying to not give any information at all, because I didn't have any information at all. Because it was my first campaign, I was not prepared enough at all, clearly. And so, thank you. It went basically from...
Yeah.
There was no door. It was just supposed to be a room with a staircase and like a back door over here. But I added a door over here. And so these guys were talking and they were like, yeah, we're meeting in that room later. And so I had to get rid of it somehow so that it didn't interact with this anymore. Like, it's not important. There was a fight in the room. And the next morning, after everyone went to bed, the door is gone. So they spend the entire next day breaking the wall down to try to find this room.
Build it.
And then repairing it.
Build it. Bill was the one that had the idea to break the wall.
Yes, but I'm just saying. Then they had to repair it. And it was insane. There were pants. There were no pants.
No pants.
No pants.
Words
and
are hard
it
with
was just
words are hard with no pants.
No pants. Yeah. So it was a series of events that led to a lot of friendship building, honestly. I feel like that brought us all kind of closer together, because it let our true characters shine, not like like campaign characters.
Sure.
But like our actual like human characters shine.
Yeah.
That to me is always really enjoyable in a campaign, in any instance, as a character or as a DM, just getting to like actually bond with the people in your party.
I would say that's
the word I couldn't think of earlier.
Yeah, I would say that was the moment that we turned from a group of people that wanted to play D&D together to actual friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd say that whole experience for sure.
Oh,
Love you guys. Come here, bring it in. Bring it in.
Yeah, group hug.
So, Kaylee, what about you?
So I guess I have the most memorable one. I guess I have two. So one was with my kids, and then one was with adults. My kiddos, one of the first times I was teaching them or running a full adventure for them, I had one of my kids was playing a paladin and one was playing a druid, and they were both very greedy, and we were trying to explain to them how paladin might not behave like that normally, and the druid was very tanky, and we were trying to explain to them that that's not quite how it usually works, and things like that. And so they walked into a room that had a big treasure chest sitting in the middle of the room, and I had not even finished describing the room, and both the paladin and the druid, I think the druid was the one that, no, the paladin got to it first. They were like, I run up and open the chest and take the treasure. And it had a trap on it, so one of them got shot with a poison arrow, and I believe the chest was a mimic too. So it was this huge chaotic mess that, like, I was like, I didn't want it to be this way for you.
Not like this. Not like this.
This is not what I intended.
But then, as far as with adults and a much more happy chaos kind of thing, I was running the starter set, which we have not ever come back to, which I know Bill very much hopes we do. And his cleric ended up getting a bunch of the goblins from the goblin hideout that they ended up killing the leader or something like that. He got a bunch of the goblins to follow him as, like, patrons of his god, and he's like, they follow him around, and he taught them how to say, no problem. And he's,
That's awesome.
like, trying to create little uniforms for them and stuff like that. So that's been, as a DM, deciding how long it's going to take him to learn how to teach them basic commands and things like that, because he has kind of taught them that he's going to take care of them, he's going to feed them, he's going to treat them right, because their leader didn't.
Yeah.
And so that's been, as a DM, kind of deciding how that would look later on. And that was a decision I had to make. Was I going to let him have these minions that are goblins, you know, essentially raising their party, which in this case, it was just him and my daughter playing. So they needed more help anyway. They were going to get NPC help anyway. So these little goblins have become his little project. So that was a lot of fun. And I look forward to more memorable moments when it's my turn to DM for Reality Break, because y'all are a blast to play with.
There you go. Yeah, that'll be
honestly
fun for sure. That'll be fun for sure. So there were a couple more questions on here. A couple of them we already answered based on, like, previous conversations and stuff. But I did have one other one that I kind of thought of while I was planning for this. There is a lot of nuance, a lot of technical stuff that a DM can implement into a game that players have to track. The big one I'm thinking of specifically, rations. Like weapon maintenance. How do you guys fall in that spectrum in terms of, like, oh, we need to eat today, so I need to make sure I mark off one of the 7 rations I have, and oh, the next time we're in town, I gotta make sure to stop at the blacksmith to repair my weapon, because I only have 50 more strikes in it. Where do you guys fall on that spectrum?
I feel like at least having those kind of markers where you can go to a town at least once a day or once a session, you know, even if it surpasses multiple days, is always important so that you can do things like that. As far as weapons, I haven't put much thought into them because generally we stop by the blacksmiths and I just kind of
Cast Exposition, thanks for the follow. Appreciate it.
Hey, thank you so much. Welcome.
Welcome in.
I kind of I don't know. I've never really thought about it. As far as like actually having those, you know?
Yeah.
But I always have them kind of around a town, at least, that has those kind of things, or those kind of NPCs who can help them get what they need. You know? Like if they're exploring through a city they don't know, or on a trail or something, you can literally just plop a house down and be like, oh, this is the local blacksmith's house, even though he has to travel 15 miles to get to work every day or whatever, but he can help you repair what you need, or he can give you a place to stay for the night, he can give you rations for the next day, you know? Something like that, having just something in your arsenal to kind of pull out and say, this is this, it's not threatening. Do what you need to do.
Yeah.
And some characters' background features will involve being able to find food and water for the party, and things like that. So I know that for rations, it can also, that's another thing you want to talk to your players about. If they're going to find that incredibly boring, frustrating, things like that, then it might be something you want to leave out. But if it's something that's really important to you, then that's another thing you can weigh in on. Also, if you look at what races you're playing with, because if you have a bunch of halflings in your party, halflings are always hungry. They are like hobbits, and they're all, unless they're eating feasts all the time, they're always hungry. And so, like, the way we'll look at it usually is you're also not going to take a long rest more than once in a day, because a long rest is 8 hours. So if you're taking a long rest, usually that's when our DM will say, make sure you mark off 1 day's rations. And as far as weapons go, I think that I have not personally, ever played long enough in game world to need to repair weapons. But you could run into a rust monster or things like that, or if you've got a weapon that they bought something that was of poor quality and they didn't realize it. But also the ammunition thing. So like if you have a ranger who is, like you said, Dee, you keep your players near a town where they can where it can be assumed that they restocked. So that's good. Yeah. But if you have a party where the ranger is the tank and they're away from town for 3 days fighting things, and the ranger has very obviously gone through more than 20 arrows, then they're going to want to try to recoup some of their arrows after every fight. And that can be a quick roll. You know, you roll a d20, and if you got better than 10, then half of them or 3/4 of them you got back. Something like that.
Yeah, because I've heard of that where the DM has the ranger or the archer or whatever roll like an investigation check, and you know, if they score above a certain range they get all their arrows back, and if they score below that then it's like, well, you get half and then the other half are broken, or you know, whatever. I myself I myself am not, I'll just come out and say it, I'm not a huge fan of like people having to stat track for or supply whatever follow in that regard, because I'm under the assumption, especially like for example you mentioned about the halflings always being hungry, I am always under the assumption that since halflings know they're always hungry, that they always keep snacks on hand, you know, so that way, and that could be a fun little twist to the character, be like, you know, sitting there eating blueberries while, you know, having an interaction or something like that. And then if you're if you're traveling with a ranger, if you you know, you have a party that's setting up camp and you're traveling with a ranger, I reasonably assume that the ranger is, you know, experienced enough to be able to go and hunt without needing to say, all right, roll a nature check to see how good of a hunt you do today, kind of thing. Because to me that kind of mechanical stuff takes away from overall storytelling, because it's like, oh yeah, by the way, looks like you guys forgot to buy rations when you were last in town, so now you only have a day's worth of rations left. What do you do? Like, that just, it can add a little bit of, like, you know, problem solving, which is fun, but to me it just seems overly technical.
Well, and on the other side of that, we have a ranger in our party who, in the beginning of one of the ways that she sort of ushered us into the tavern and making friends, was she went hunting to get meat for the the meal that night at the tavern, and one of our party went to help her. I think that it didn't. They weren't very helpful because they weren't as skilled as her. And the nature check was to find out how much, because it was it was known she could go get stuff. It was the nature check showed how much she came back with, and that bringing home 2 deer to this tavern owner that you're meeting was got her off on a good foot with the tavern owner, because the tavern owner's like, sweet fresh deer, so.
Yeah, doing it to advance the story or build a relationship. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Like a similar, because that's very much like we're trying to get in good with this owner of this bar.
Right.
Let me show them how good of a hunter I am to get in. But like, if it's you can't. Right. But if you're camping for the night and it's like, okay, the ranger needs to roll a nature check to see, do you guys eat tonight? That to me just seems kind of excessive.
Like tracking rations, we were trapped in a maze in the Feywild. There was no food to be found around us, and so like we did have to track our rations while we were trapped in that maze.
Yeah, I feel like situations like that are more important than just saying, okay, a day has passed, check off your rations, as opposed to like when you really need them and then having them be able to go to that town and say, restock.
Right.
Like everything, restock.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, that something like that, I could see how it can add purpose for being in town outside of like trying to find storyline stuff.
Right.
But once again, like to me, that just seems overly technical. So.
Yeah.
And you want to teach your players those mechanics that you want to use outside of dangerous situations. It's like a platformer game. So like the first time you experience a thing that you have to do, it's not a high stakes experience. It's going to be, if you're learning how to jump up on a platform, the platform's not going to have death below it. You're just learning how to jump up. And so like if you're learning that sometimes you're going to have to track rations, it's only when you're a day away from town or whatever. Not the first time you're hearing about tracking rations is when you're lost in a maze in the Feywild and you don't know when you're going to get out.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, because that's something that's enhancing a story that you're telling as opposed to just a like checking the box kind of thing.
Right.
Like water, for instance. I always assume that my characters know how to find fresh water if they need to. Just stuff like that.
Right, as if it's, and if your character doesn't, that'd be something in their background. This person was sheltered and had everything taken care of, and they're awful at survival out in the wilderness. So then this person as a player needs to sort of play to that, and you can reward them with inspiration if their player like suffers because of it, where it's like, oh no, I don't have any food or water, I left the party, and then they have to run back or whatever. So no, I agree. Collaboration is always good. It's a lot of fun to work
absolutely
together.
Like this has just been good brainstorming, like between what we three been talking about and what chat's been providing. So once again, shout out to everybody that's been chatting. Lurkers, you are appreciated as well. And we love the people that are in chat engaging and providing suggestions and recommendations and stuff that they do or questions that they have. So, that was the, like what Kaylee said, that was the point of this DM summit, was to, kind of have conversations. So I guess let's wrap up with a couple like quick hitter questions.
Quickly pop this in the chat for everybody that's joined since the last time I did. This is the folder of characters that we created with the other members of Reality Break. We created a bunch of basic characters that ended up having a semi-related backstory, so feel free to check those out. They're on the Avray character sheets. So
there you go.
And away you go with the questions.
There you go. All right. So first off, what is one thing that... no, let me scratch that question. Asking these quick-hitting questions very slowly. That's what I'm doing. What is one piece of advice you would give to a new DM? Or someone that is DMing for the first time?
Give yourself a break.
Slow.
Whoa, you guys talked at the same time. Do you first?
Take it slow. Don't think that you have to have every single detail planned at that time. because it will all change at the drop of a hat. And you have to be prepared for that more so than having this beautiful, intricate storyline starting from A to B and B to C and going, I want them to go here and then here and then here, because, they'll go from here to here and then they may see a shiny little object over there that they want to go explore because you mentioned it by accident. Like we were talking about earlier, the roses in the window, and having to go back to that on, oh, I want to go smell the roses. So taking it slow and just building that world as you go, I guess, for like improv. I've never DM'd a module before, so I don't really know. I mean, there's guidelines. I've played modules. But if you're home brewing, having that kind of detailed world rather than a story is much easier to play with. Literally, like, to play with and mold as you go. So just take it slow.
All right, Kaylee?
I would say your players are not your enemy, and you are not your player's enemy, especially if, no matter whether you've experienced that before, that you're working together, and it's going to be sometimes, sometimes you're going to feel like your plans aren't working out, but you can always loop them back, like everything is possible because you are the one creating the world. But it's not as much fun if people feel like they're fighting each other, the ones that they're not supposed to be fighting.
For sure. Let's see, your cast put in here, keep your written things simple. Don't need to be large paragraphs of information. Point form is best form. And in combat, group together like-minded opponents. Bullet points are fantastic. Like, all of my note-taking for any campaign I've DM'd has always just been bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, bullet point. So that is fantastic. For me...
And even they just come with flavor text, and you add the rest. Sorry.
No, you're fine. So for me, and this seems like the silliest thing, because it would be like the point, but just remember you're there to have fun. Like, because you can sometimes get so wrapped up in, like, am I doing a good job? Are my players having a good time? I'm stressing out about this thing. I'm stressing out about that thing. Just remember that, like, if you could tell if your players are having a good time. And if and as long as you are having fun and your players are having fun, then the rest of it kind of doesn't matter. Whether you're telling this eloquent, fantastic story or you're telling something that is simple and down to earth, whether you're able to pull out these amazing NPCs that have depth and story, or you're just telling or you're providing someone that's just like, this is a plain shopkeeper. The point is, like, as long as you're just having fun and the people you're playing with are having fun, that's really the most important thing. And the minute you guys stop having fun, either you as a DM or your players, that's when you need to sit down and go, okay, what's going on? What can I do to help you guys have a good time? Or what can you do to help me continue to have a good time? Stuff like that.
Yeah, we touched on that class, the soliciting feedback. It is definitely important. And giving feedback outside of session. Obviously, as a DM or as a player, it is not comfortable to experience being told that you don't like how something is going or whatever, right during the middle of a session, during the middle of combat or anything like that. Which also, if there's like a boundary that's been crossed, also don't be afraid to say something, in session and be like, well, we need to pause and have an OOC, an out of character conversation real quick.
Right.
But as much as possible, keep that stuff, be like, hey, after session, can we discuss the direction that this is going?
Yep. And the tone is important with that too. Like, you're going to take, hey, I had a question about this, can we talk about it? Versus, I hate when you do this. Those are those two conversations are gonna go totally different directions. So.
Well, and generally you're playing with your friends, so of course you're going to be more open with your friends and just be like, hey man, this is what I need to do, can it be done? As opposed to, I really don't like the way that this is happening, like,
right.
You're not
know your audience.
Doing something wrong, or do you feel like we're going through these bosses, or these baddies too quickly? can you buff them up instead of nerfing me? Because that idea, one of our in the chat had experience being nerfed by the DM, and that hurt. Like that can get someone not wanting to play. So you want to be careful. If you let a character do something and you're gonna have to turn around and nerf that, you really might want to look at instead buffing the encounters and and then next time not allowing that whatever it is. But it sounds like if you're trying to nerf regular rules, then you just need to make your encounters more difficult.
D, you forgot to put the word fool into that last comment. Check yourself before you wreck yourself, fool. Would have been a much more appropriate.
I might know the answer to this. Do you prefer your world building outside in or inside out? Meaning, are you going to think of your wide strokes, your theme of the world, your political landscapes, things like that, and build down? Or are you going to start with a location that's having a problem and build up and out from there?
I am the latter.
So you are take small problem, expand to big problem.
Yes.
Okay.
So leaving room to sort of just design that bigger world as you please from each individual location.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I, ironically enough, I am the opposite. I plan, when I sit down, especially for our homebrew, when I sit down to plan a campaign, my goal is to figure out what is the big thing that I want the party to eventually tackle, accomplish, what have you. And so then from there, I scale down to, okay, what do they need to do here? What can they do here? What can they do there? To eventually get here. And the reason why I do that is because it allows the characters to free-form encounters or experiences that I can also tailor to eventually tie into what they're doing in the big picture.
Yeah. I like that. I love that we got both views. We got I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. I like to know the basic lay of things. But I won't necessarily look at the overarching world problem as much as more individual problems throughout the world. But I still want to know for my own sake, like what the general world looks like, kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. So next quick hitting question I have is what is your favorite thing that a player does during a session or a campaign? And I say that I'll start to give you guys an example. I love when a player makes a choice or has a conversation in character, even if it goes against what they as a person would normally think, or like you can read the room and like as a player you go, well, clearly this is what should happen. But I love it when a player dedicates to role playing so much that they make a decision or have a conversation knowing that that's probably not what the quote unquote outcome should be.
Right.
But they're dedicating to their role enough to like do that, because as a DM, I love when the players, because I've said it before a couple times already on stream, I enjoy combat, but I love the role playing. And so I love when players role play so much that they tailor decisions and conversations based on what their character would do, not what makes the most tactical sense.
Yeah, mine is very similar. I personally just love when there's always at the start of a campaign, and this is DM, character, whatever, side, just playing in a campaign as is, there is always a point when you see it switch. Like you see them become their character, and they're choosing actively to actually get into it. Accent, background, anything along those lines. If they're brooding, they like sit there with that face. It's not just sitting there like listening to the campaign or whatever, listening to what's
like they
going
look
on.
grouchy.
they're fully immersed. And when that switch happens, that always just makes me like head to toe tingle, and I'm like,
Yeah.
like,
Oh, by the way, before Kaylee, we have to give a quick shout out to River Watcher 3. That is my mom.
Welcome in,
Yeah!
Ma.
This is the stream of
Mom stream.
I love it. Welcome in.
And that's because you always did a maze from end to start. That's when I was a kid. I would start, instead of going from the start and figuring out how to the end, I would go the other way around.
Yes.
Why, I have no idea, but...
And I think that rule of cool is definitely, like, for any new DM, you can always submit to the rule of cool. If it's cool, you can let it happen. Like, it's fine. I would agree on the fact of, like, one of my favorite things to see is sort of like what Jason had talked about, where you used your character's abilities to do what they do best, because that's what they do. Kind of like when I was playing that druid in your campaign, D, and I got to throw the thorns on the ground and stop them in their tracks, you know, and they were still able to move afterwards, but like they had to move in difficult terrain or whatever it was, so that my party mates could come in and get them. So I love to see a person really start to connect with what their character can do and use those abilities in conjunction either with more of their own abilities or their party mates' abilities. It is so fun to see, because that's what a party of adventurers would be doing. They will have learned how to work together, and that's going to get better with time. So that's a really fun thing to see.
Yep. I mean, that ties into what Kira did during the bandit conflict, where she got up on a horse, rode the horse in, and asked to do all the necessary checks to make sure she did this fantastic flip and grappled this the archer, this archer that you guys are combating, and like did it all successfully, because she thought outside the box and was like, hey, I could just run up and try to do it, but let me try to do it in a cool way.
Yeah. And that's where you think about every action takes up to 6 seconds. And so, you know, what can you do in 6 seconds? You know, you might have to make multiple rolls for that. But, you know, it came out perfectly when you're making great rolls. Or let's say, you know, 2 of them were great and 1 of them was only mediocre. So, you know, you rode up just fine. You went to jump off and you almost didn't stick the landing, but you just happened to clean it up at the end. You know, that's a lot of fun to work with too.
Yeah,
even if you know from the start you're going to let the person do it, you know, or not do it.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't always have to punish them or reward them. It can just be like, yeah, cool. What does it look like? What do you do?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Oh, and another, I had another, I know I'm doing 2 things, but another thing I would recommend for new DMs or someone that's DMing for the first time, a natural 1 is not an automatic, like, worst possible case scenario failure. Conversely, a natural 20 is not an automatic, like, everything works out absolutely perfect and it's great.
It's just
like,
usually,
It's usually, like, for example, like, you know, if you do a history check on something and you roll a natural 1, you're not going to be like, I'm dumb, I don't know anything. It's going to be like, you know this little bit, but it's not enough to expound what you're going to do. Yeah. Because, like, natural 1s, like, can be used in a, like, funny type scenario, like when you're trying to pass a stealth check and you roll a natural 1. That can be a funny outcome.
You think you're totally hidden. You think that you are absolutely the most hidden person in the room.
Yeah, exactly. But really, you're like Kronk in, you know, Emperor's New Groove. Where you're like, you just have the people walking by, they're like, what's going on? But on the other hand, like, intelligence checks for something, investigation checks. You're not, like, if you roll natural 1, you're not going to be like, I don't know where my feet are, It's, you know, it's important to give them even a little bit of something with something like that. And Cass brings up that point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you could also turn that into either A, you're not quite sure what their name was, but you think you heard this, especially if you wanted them to have some information. But if you didn't, and it was a really low roll, you could be like, you are 100% sure it was this, and it's the wrong information.
I actually had I actually was a player on a DM. I was a player in a campaign where the DM had us do a blind confidence roll with stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, like, when we're doing an investigation check, like checking for traps, he would have us do a blind roll. He would look at it and go, you are 100% certain this door is not trapped. And you're like, am I 100% certain? Or am I 100% certain I'm right? Or am I 100% certain I'm wrong? I don't know. So, I thought that was a fun little mechanic twist.
Yeah.
As far as like a nat 20, nat 1, I like to think of it as all actions have consequences. Could be good, could be bad, could be silly, could be serious, you know, whatever. Even if they get that nat 20 and they get the information they need, it could still come with a bad consequence.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you were egging on something and you think, yeah, I'm victorious because I got a nat 20. No, you done hecked up. Like, you know, anything along those lines, because anything can happen.
Yep.
It's
absolutely.
It's a made-up world. It's a fantasy game. Like,
also,
what's that?
Things have a difficulty class of 25 or 30, and so you could get a nat 20 and not succeed.
Yeah.
Yep. For sure. Yeah, what's that line from Community? I'm a dungeon master. I create this world with limitless possibilities and put limits on it.
Yep.
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 So last kind of quick fire question I have. This is a little bit different than what I asked. What is something that you would like that you like players to do? And I'll start with saying I like when players do suggestions for doing checks. So, like, for example, like if we walk it, like if they walk in, like using the example I had before with the skeleton with the scroll on it. I like it when a player goes, can I roll a history check to see if I recognize the seal on the scroll? Or if they open it up and say, can I roll a history check to see if I recognize the writing? Stuff like that. Because that makes them think more about what they can do. And then it also gives me an opportunity to like craft something with it. Like if they roll a 5, I go, well, you recognize that this is definitely like official writing, but the names don't really register. Whereas if they roll a 15, you go, well, you clearly recognize that this is the handwriting of the king, and he's ordering an execution of somebody, you know, blah 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 kind of thing. So it adds a like mechanic to enhance storytelling. So I like when characters do like asked to do rolls to do something. And then if I don't think they need to, then I can just say, no, you read it and you figure out X, Y, and Z things. So,
yeah, I understand where you're going with that, and I would say, you probably, as you have become a more experienced DM, you probably notice more times too, where if they didn't say, can I make a history check, where if instead they say, do I recognize the handwriting on the scroll, then you might see that as, well, make a history check. To sort of ease players into, because like what Cass says here, explain what they're wanting to do with their insight check. So conversely, if you just have someone going, can I make an insight check on that? You kind of want to, instead it should be more of like, can I make an insight check to see if they're lying? Or whatever else it is. So yeah, I like that as a trigger to sort of see.
And you can help a little bit with it. As a DM, if they say, can I make an insight check? You can always do, sure, what are you wanting to check out? Which makes them explain it a little bit more. But if they come out right away and say it, then absolutely makes it easier.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And I would say that it's interacting with the world. Players interacting with different ways to interact with the world. Not just, I'm going to go to the tavern or I'm going to go to the general store. But, I did see these roses outside of the bakery, and the baker said that Susan's been eyeing her roses for years. Well, maybe we need to find out that, something about Susan or whatever it is, because you can then plant so many hooks to throw in so many different adventures. So it's a lot of fun to kind of let them explore.
Yeah, that's kind of building off of what you just said. That's kind of my thing. Was one of my favorite like memories from my long friggin' one shot was when Damakos asked me like, I'm in the square, what do I see? And I explain everything. I'm like, there's a statue of whatever, there's people walking through, there's a shop, there's a potion shop, and then there's a well. And you got on that well for some odd reason, and I just went with it. And it was one of those things. It was just a well.
Yeah.
People need water. Like, that's why there was a well.
Yeah.
But you went with it so hard. And then when you finally realized it's just a well.
Just a well. Well,
it's just a well.
Well, and that's what, and that ties back to what Kaylee had mentioned before, where you're like, you mentioned something as a DM, players naturally go, they mentioned that for a reason, it must be important.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But it's just one of those things where when they actively want to know more, you know, I would like to roll perception for this, or I would like to know a little bit more about this person, even if they are plain.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know more about this story specifically. What are they hiding behind that door that they keep looking at? You know, if they actually take that initiative and
wordplay,
roll with it.
Double wordplay.
Ah, man, I'm just. If they can actually like do that, it makes it more intriguing to you as a DM. You know, well, they're just roses. It's just a well, but you know, maybe these roses are from the royal garden, and they've been in the royal garden for centuries, and they actually brew a specific potion that helps do whatever, you know? Yeah. You can kind of build on that, and it just helps, you know, with the lore, with character building, with team building. It all helps.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just a well.
I mean, I'm pretty sure there was something I missed when I investigated it, so we might have to go back to that town and look at that well again, because
no,
there's clearly something going on with that well that I missed.
Yeah, when they want to interact with the world, that's honestly my favorite thing.
Because it's I made this is kind of like a little bit of a selfish thing as a DM. It's like, I spent all this time writing up this world. I made these maps. The least you could do is freaking walk around it and look around and say, oh, that statue looks cool. Let me go look at it. Because I planned that statue for a specific reason. Look at it!
Well, and that's where you have plot points in each location and or recyclable content, so that when they go to this city, you know, they didn't interact with this quest you had over here, but that's okay, because it's happening at this city now.
Cass said, or even when they're in character creation and they want to build world history, yes.
Session zero are so important. You can have
or
session 1, you know, I mean,
session 8 in our regard.
Yeah. Hey, sometimes you just want to marry the first guy you meet.
That's just basically what you did until he flirts back and you go, Hunda, Hunda. Wait, you really like me?
I didn't know he could do that.
Well, and that was really kind of a personal. It was really kind of a personal challenge when you were like, oh, I always try to flirt. I always try to have my character flirt with an NPC and throw the DM off. And I'm like, challenge accepted.
And you did, man. You did.
And I love that, like, because especially I don't know how many are still here that heard that no matter when it happens, you can have these conversations about your world, and decide that, like, oh, that's how my story fits into this world then. And you can have that be a conversation with the wider party or a conversation just with your DM, and just keep note of that so that don't be afraid later on to be like, hey, this thing about me that we discussed earlier, is that relevant right now? Like, you know, maybe your character is from a secret society that is, you know, right now you happen to be in a situation where being a member of that secret society might be helpful, and you might be able to use the code word from that secret society, and all of a sudden, you know, these thugs at the door are looking at you very differently, and your party has a way in.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah.
so that's a fun thing to do.
And the conversations can happen anytime. It could be the session 0 where you have a ton of conversation. And it could be like session 20 where you're like, by the way, is it okay if we do this? Or I wanted to add this, is that okay? You know,
Yeah.
those it's an evolving, like life, it evolves. And you have to keep up. I should just change this title to like Reality Break Gives Life Lessons.
Life lessons with reality break. Yeah,
Life
there we
Lessons
go.
with Reality Break. Because that's what I feel like we're partially doing while talking about DMing for Dungeons and Dragons.
Well, and I feel like that's kind of the point of RPGs, is the fact that you can make it what you want. You know, if you want an aspect of your life, it's like simulation games. You know, if you want an aspect of your life, put it in there.
Yep.
Throw it in there. If you have something about your personal character that you really like, that you want other people to know, but you don't personally know how to show it, put it in your character. Let it shine through that. That will help you in life. Show it to other people, you know? I've done it before.
Yes, mini session zeros. Those out of character sessions.
Yep.
Like class says here, always have conversations. There's 60 sessions into a campaign. We've been playing a long running campaign for over 2 years now with my family and our friends DM that are playing. And we still have conversations outside of the game. We still discuss, how would Shayna have felt if this had happened? How would so-and-so have reacted if, you know, somebody said something before they left or while they were gone or whatever it is? So it's a great... Oh, and let me quickly give everybody... I don't know if this is an item, but it's now a homebrew item in our campaign. Because we have people like Bill who works crazy hours and stuff like that. Sometimes we have people who can't make it to session. And early on, we had someone who was a wizard who died when they were under control of the DM because we were all fresh and it didn't go great. And so now we have this thing which we collectively lovingly call the Pokeball of Holding, but it's basically like a little amulet that kind of like explodes with light and sucks in the character that is not there that day. And inside that ball, they're doing whatever we happen to be doing. So if we're walking and exploring, if we look at them, the character seems to be looking around, walking and exploring. If we're fighting, they're fighting. And so it's also the way to keep them up without being behind on experience and stuff like that. And it's really funny because before our characters figured out what the thing did, there was quite a few times where at the beginning of the session, all of a sudden there's this huge flash of light and one character is here and 2 are gone. It was never one's, you know, it was only people who weren't there that day, but it was so fun to sort of work that in.
Yep. Good point, Cast, about Vex's necklace from Trinket. Yep. And she just, instead of having Trinket walking around all the time, it's like Trinket's in there, and then all of a sudden it's like pop Trinket out when needed. So
we were able to sort of work it into our story because one day Shayna was really mad and she threw the thing down on the ground and it popped open and out popped Bill's character Rune, and so that was like, she's like, oh, be how we get him out. So the next session she's like throwing it at the ground trying to get him out. It didn't work.
I love it.
That'd be fun.
That's great.
All right, well, I think we're going to be about wrapping this up. Any last minute thoughts, things you wanted to make sure we reiterated or anything like that? We'll start with Kaylee.
I thought this was great and I want to do this again. I think this was an excellent start. I think that we could do different methods of world building, like, you know, when we reach affiliate and we reach out to World Anvil because we're not sponsored yet, and D&D Beyond and all those other options. But just, I love that we have sort of explored so many different ways to come at things, and that would be my thing that I hope that everybody remembers, is there is so many more ways than one to handle anything that's going on in your game or in your circle or anything like that. So don't be afraid to try other ways, especially if it doesn't seem like the one you wanted to go with, because it could evolve very easily.
Yeah, there is no one way to DM or be a player, for sure.
Yeah.
Agreed. All right.
Yeah.
D?
kind of going off of cast there, if you are afraid to be a DM, like I was, having a group of friends who know the game, who can make it comfortable for you, with you, and can kind of guide things as needed, like to help you along the way, is a great way to get into it, honestly. Like, I have wanted to build my own world and DM my own campaign for a long time now, but I was never given the opportunity until Tony reached out to me on Twitter one day because I had a D&D coloring book and I was coloring at work, and he was like, "Oh, you play D&D?" And I was like, "I do." And he goes, "You want to DM?" I was like, "Maybe." But honestly, it was the kickstart that I needed. Was not a stranger reaching out to me, but like a potential friend reaching out to me and going, "I also do this thing. And there's some other people that also play that we could get together and, you know, kind of go that." And lo and behold, we started a stream. So it's one of those things that's like, you can make it comfortable for you as a DM, as a player. If it's a game that you love, just do it. There's nothing holding you back except you.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear anything you said. I just got stopped at potential friend. My heart hurts.
I will literally never forget getting that DM, and you were like, "Hey, you play D&D?" Because it was like maybe she just likes coloring, but does she actually like D&D?
I don't know. You know, some people just grab coloring books wherever they can and just like to color, you know?
But then, like, 3 minutes into the conversation, you were just like, "You want a DM?" I was like, "Okay."
Well, and that's because that goes back to, like, that I'm DMing a total stranger completely out of the blue, because we had met through another Discord server.
Yep.
But I only, like, knew you, like, of your name. Like, I didn't know anything about you. You big time. Miss Big...
No. Not at all.
But I was like, I'm gonna take a risk in DM, and if she, like, blocks me, like, hates me forever, whatever, fine, I guess. No hair off my back, but if she responds and we have a healthy conversation about this, that could be a thing. And it grew into this thing where now the 6 of us hang out all the time.
Yeah.
And we talk on Discord, and we lift each other up, and it's beautiful.
Yep.
Well, and River Watcher is asking about when we meet. So our campaign streams are every other Tuesday. We've also been doing these in-between ones where we did some basic character creation, and this is our DM Summit. You should be able to go to our Twitch page and go to videos, and they're all going to be highlights. All of our older sessions, are the ones that we do have saved, are on there. And I know we're also looking at possibly signing up for YouTube and putting some of them on there too in some playlists.
Yep.
So
I guess
1 follower away from 50.
1 follower! We need 1 more follower to hit 1 million!
Woo woo woo! Yeah. I guess the last thing that the parting thought I would have, the biggest thing, and we've reiterated it, we've talked about it a bit already, but the biggest thing I want to reiterate is keep a healthy, open line of communication with your players. Because there, especially, and I didn't talk about this much, but if you want to introduce something that may potentially make players feel uncomfortable, it's always good to run it by them first. Say, "Hey, there it is! We did it!
What?
Queen T Gaming, number 50! Woo!
So we should tonight, folks.
Yes, Queen! Yes!
Yes, Queen!
Yes!
So,
Thank you so much!
gnarly, dude. I couldn't leave you hanging. Thanks, cast. Oh, appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much.
All right, so now one of us has to go and check the group email and make sure.
So if we're lucky, it'll be tonight. It might not be for a couple of days. Sometimes it takes a couple of days to catch up. But yeah.
Yep. Yes. Well, geez. So once again, just keep an open line of communication. Like, because you have to make sure everybody's on the same wavelength. Because the minute somebody stops talking, they're probably not having a good time, and then that's when a campaign or group can fall apart. So just keep talking. Just say, hey, can we do this? Can we try this? No? Okay. Yes? Great. Let's figure it out. So, yeah, so just keep talking. And eventually, complete strangers you meet on the internet can become friends. If you keep talking.
Bro.
Woo. Alright, well, that, I think, is going to conclude the DM Summit. So it's time to head back to the real world. But, as Kaylee said, make sure you check us this coming Tuesday at 8 p.m. Central Time, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, for the next campaign session. Got a lot of spice set up for that, so that'll be a lot of fun.
He's getting...
D's gonna get... Morag's gonna get some fun stuff. Dee-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-da.
What?
And hot. So make sure you go and follow the Twitter account. That's Reality Break 20 for updates on streams, memes. The meme game has really stepped up. Feel free to. We do questions of the day. Feel free to post questions you have or discussion points or whatever. You know, one of the 6 of us is in charge of that at any time. So
yeah. You'll reach out to one of us, and by extension, reach out to all of us.
Yeah.
We will have a Discord, especially now that we're going to be affiliate. Woo!
Yep. So we're probably going to be we're probably going to have to do a scrub of the Discord real quick, and add some additional channels and stuff like that, and then we'll update the Twitter account and the homepage, Twitch homepage, with the Discord once we get all that cleaned up and kind of squared away. But thanks for everyone that stopped in. Thanks for the new followers. Thanks for the chats. The conversation was fantastic. I loved every second of it. And we will see you guys
Tuesday.
Hopefully Tuesday. And if not, don't be afraid to go and check out the VODs.
Yes.
Do clips. Post stuff on the social medias. We love every second of that. So have a good rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, or night, folks. You take care now.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.